You know, if I had a nickel for every game I played this year that explored the theme of unrestrained individualism causing a loss of humanity, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
I am, of course, referring to Cyberpunk 2077, the subject of this channel's most recent video essay, and to Bioshock, the topic at hand. At first glance, the 2 games share hardly anything in common, but I was surprised at the ties between them that I kept discovering as I dug. Not only do they share a central theme, but also, Bioshock is considered the spiritual successor to System Shock 1 and 2, which are set in the 2070s and beyond in a cyberpunk vision of the future. But it is that main theme that interests me most. When given unlimited power to change and choose who and what we are, when granted boundless freedom to do whatever we so please, we end up losing ourselves. In the world of Night City, this was accomplished by various cybernetic implants, chrome replacing flesh in every imaginable way, whereas plasmids, DNA rewrites that give you superpowers essentially, are the technology of the day in Bioshock, in the grand underwater city of Rapture.
I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
Rapture is one of the most fascinating locales in all of gaming, and its striking nature is made clear long before you reach the city, before you even enter the bathysphere that will take you far below the waves. After your plane crash lands in an unspecified part of the Atlantic, you happen upon an impossibility, a skyscraper in the middle of the ocean. And within that impressive structure, you find the bust of an imperious-looking man, beneath which a banner reads, "No gods or kings, only man." That is the motto of Rapture, of its creator, Andrew Ryan. Man is the origin and the apex of all his works. He will not be constrained, not by law, not by morality, and certainly not by religion. It seems odd, then, that so many places within Rapture have religious symbolism. I mean, the name Rapture refers to a belief originating in the first half of the 19th century among some sects of Christians, which holds that at the second coming, some, if not all, faithful will be suddenly and bodily assumed into heaven. Now, it's not hard to see how the name applies here. The true believers in Andrew Ryan's vision were taken out of the world and brought to this new paradise on the ocean floor. But why borrow the term from a religion you want nothing to do with? Why name your underwater forest Arcadia, the home of the mythological Pan? For that matter, why name the vast majority of Rapture's sectors after divinities or something related to them? The lower classes live around Apollo Square, while the wealthier inhabit Mercury Suites, and the cream of the crop reside in Olympus Heights. Submarines come and go from Neptune's bounty. The entire city is powered by the generators of Hephaestus, and the Big Daddies are created inside Point Prometheus. But that's just Greek mythology, I hear you say. Those are just convenient names that everyone will understand. No one in the 20th century believes in those gods anymore. Well, what about Adam and Eve then? What about the 2 substances that allow Rapture's residents to rewrite their genetic code and to fuel the resulting abilities? At the very least, you cannot deny that a great many people in the 1900s still held fast to the faith that those names refer to. Is it possible that the naming of Rapture, its regions, and its most valuable resources is more than a throwback to the bygone beliefs of yesteryear? If a man does not believe in God, he will create one to believe in and to worship. Rapture was built not merely as a city, not simply a place where men could be free of all overseers and interferers, but as a monument, a temple, an idol. Let us begin, then, with the philosophy of the man responsible for this magnificent golden calf, Andrew Ryan. Rapture's founder is not a sneaky sort of fellow, not the kind of man who hides his motives. When you come to his city, you will know exactly why and for whom he built it.
Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
A villain such as Andrew Ryan would not work nearly so well if his personal philosophy did not contain any notes of truth. Men do deserve the fruits of their own labor. If you take the product away from him entirely, man will refuse to produce. On the flip side, if a man is given all the fruit he could ever ask for without having to work, why would he work? And not working, not striving for one's own interests is anathema for Mr. Ryan. He believes in the great chain, a power beyond that of the individual, a combination of all mankind's efforts.
But it is only when we struggle in our own interest that the chain pulls society in the right direction.
You can already see the cracks in Ryan's worldview. Naturally, some men's interests will conflict with those of other men. Would this great chain then not be ground to a standstill, or tugged this way and that without any actual macro-level progress? Perhaps our villain would argue that the greater ideas and more dedicated workers would prevail in such a case, that the most valuable products and innovations would possess the strength to overcome the weaklings who might oppose them. The great chain is so vastly theoretical anyway, might as well just make up how it works. One thing that is absolutely not a part of Ryan's great chain philosophy, however, is charity.
What is the greatest lie ever created? What is the most vicious obscenity ever perpetrated on mankind? Slavery, the Holocaust, dictatorship. No, it's the tool with which all that wickedness is built. Altruism.
Some personal background is needed to put that speech into proper context. Andrew Ryan was not always Andrew Ryan. He was born Andrei Ranovsky. You might discover a message to a lover where he signs off as Andrei, and grew up in Belarus during World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution. This traumatic experience led him, quite understandably, to believe that governments providing for their people is a terrible lie, that man is not owed anything and must earn everything. When someone sees the flag bearers of a given ideology committing atrocities, the unfortunate yet natural reaction is for him to swing violently in the opposite direction. The idea of all people within a given community sharing food, water, and every resource to ensure that no one goes without is undoubtedly noble. Precious few political schools of thought originate from evil origins because evil is not original. But we don't tend to acknowledge that. We rarely see the roots, we only witness the rotten fruit and assume the roots must be corrupt as well. Andrew Ryan certainly did. Altruism is the core idea from which communism sprang, so it must be wholly denounced. Misguided though he may have been, Ryan's rejection of charity hits on that truth about the nature of evil that we would do well to heed. When Gandalf rejects Frodo's offer of the One Ring, he asserts that it would use his pity and the desire to do good to make him into a Dark Lord who Tolkien says would be even worse than Sauron. That's the second video in a row on this channel where I've referenced that line. It's a really good line, okay? It's important for us to remember that most evildoers, whether in fiction or in real life, do not largely start out with evil intentions. And on the flip side, that having noble goals does not guarantee one's actions will not cause harm. Was Andrew Ryan maniacally selfish and greedy? Absolutely. But he didn't start out that way. He began as a young man seeking to escape and defy a system of the opposite nature, one that used altruism as both sword and shield. You don't have to like him. You most definitely should not think he is justified, but you should understand where he came from. Modern Hollywood villains tend to fall into one of two categories. Either they are stand-ins for anti-progressive men who are against current thing and are cast as totally reprehensible, or they are highly sympathetic to the point that a significant portion of the audience will side with them, because the writers sure seem to. Both of those are terrible archetypes. Your villain should not necessarily be relatable, but he must be understandable. Even pure evil villains like Emperor Palpatine make sense. He wants power, more and more of it without end. That is, sadly, an incredibly human desire, and Andrew Ryan is just a man. A man of vast intelligence and skill, obviously. I mean, he built a city at the bottom of the ocean.
It was not impossible to build Rapture at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to build it anywhere else.
Above all else, Ryan cherished what he would call freedom. The absolute, unrestrained, unqualified autonomy to do as he wished with that which belonged to him. Again, he did not start from a place of evil there. The right to private property and the ability to dispose of it according to one's desires and beliefs is good and allows for true charity and altruism. There is the greatest pleasure in doing a kindness or service to friends or guests or companions, which can only be rendered when a man has private property. And yes, I quoted that line from Aristotle's Politics in the last video too. Like I said, 2 nickels. The problem arises, of course, when the free use of a man's own money and possessions becomes his god, which is exactly what happened to our antagonist. One of the most fascinating of Ryan's diaries, which you find during your journey through Rapture, concerns his time before building the city. He recalls how he owned a private forest, but the government tried to force him to turn it into a public park.
Congress moved to nationalize my forest. I burnt it to the ground. God did not plant the seeds of this Arcadia.
Is petty even the right word for such an act? It is petty, to be sure, but on such a grand scale that there has to be a better word for it. I don't think we've invented one yet, sadly. Anyway, this is the extreme end a man will hit when he makes his ultimate good his stuff and his power over it. He will lack any regard for nature, for beauty, for kindness and charity. There is only what I have and what I do not have. Yet. I do love that Ryan recreated that forest at the bottom of the ocean and then promptly turned it into a paid amusement park.
The man hires me to build a forest at the bottom of the ocean and then turns a walk in the woods into a luxury.
There's a lot wrong with Andrew Ryan's philosophy, but I think this might be the most damning. It rejects anything that is not useful and turns those things that should be enjoyed for their own inherent goodness into resources to be exploited and products to be sold. Arcadia refers to the splendor and peace of the forest that bears its name, to the harmony one ought to experience in such a place. Everyone ought to have their own Arcadia, a place where you can escape for a bit to walk or sit, just think and be alone with nature. About a block away from my house, there is a 1.5-mile-ish trail that runs through the woods and is absolutely perfect for a lunchtime stroll. I can get up from my desk, walk down the street, and get lost, metaphorically, in the woods, letting my mind wander where it will. It's peaceful, it's wonderful, it has become downright necessary, and it's free. I mean, I'm sure my taxes fund it in some way, but it's a dirt trail through the woods. How much could it cost? $10? It's not that charging to enter a park is the problem. Most national parks in the US have entrance fees after all, but rather the possessive mindset behind it. This is mine, Andrew Ryan says to himself. It only exists to serve me. According to his great chain theory, if everyone acts in like manner, society will move in an agreeable, progressive direction. That line of thinking is challenged when some entrepreneurial, though that's not the term Ryan would use, citizens of Rapture discover they can hack the various machines and acquire goods for less than the machine's owners had specified. Mr. Ryan denounces this behavior as parasitic.
Should not need to remind each and every citizen of Rapture that free enterprise is the foundation upon which our society has been established. Parasites will be punished.
I'm sorry, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? If these creative and diligent chaps can decipher a method of bypassing the security of vending machines, should they not reap the rewards? Doing so takes skill, time, and effort, after all. Not to mention, it creates a new market for security experts who can be hired by the owners of the various machines to ensure they cannot be hacked, until their new techniques are bypassed by the evolution of the hackers, and the defenders must up their game as well. Is that not progress? Is that not the great chain? Everyone is getting smarter and more talented as time wears on. What's wrong with that? The argument I just laid out is, of course, absolutely ridiculous in a normal society, but Rapture is not a normal society. It is one that has taken laissez-faire capitalism to its extreme end and is now reaping the inevitable reward of such a philosophy. If man would just refrain from stealing and focus on creating his own worthy products or services, this system would work well. If man would just be satisfied with having exactly the same as his neighbor and with having no property of his own, this system would work well. If man would just accept his place in life, whether he is a noble lord or a lowly serf, this system would work well. If man would just... The problem throughout history is that man will not just. In every economic system ever created, there will be flaws, as these systems are all man-made, and there will be men who come along thinking it worth their time to exploit those flaws, rather than operate within the system as intended. Ultimately, there is no real choice other than this.
Must be governed.
Shout out Master and Commander, one of the greatest films of the 21st century. It's a shame it got overshadowed by the greatest movie of the century that came out in the same year. Anyway, Ryan rejects this necessary truth for a time. He does not believe that man must be governed. He insists against it, emphatically and repeatedly. Even when there is blood in the streets as the plasmid-crazed citizens of Rapture turn on one another, he declines to intervene.
But I will make no proclamations. I will dictate no laws.
Time, he believes, will settle all things as they ought to be settled.
The market does not respond like an infant, shrieking at the first sign of displeasure. The market is patient, and we must be too.
What does that sound like to you? Sounds an awful lot like faith to me. Sounds like hope. Sounds like a man who believes in something greater than himself. Something that can and will prevail, no matter how much others try to muck it up. A man must believe in something. If he does not believe he is created by God, he is certain to create one to his own liking and to suit his own needs and wants. He may not realize it, but he will do it. Ryan acknowledges this fact. As we saw earlier, he believes in the great chain, or so he thinks. But the chain of industry begins to slip away from him as Frank Fontaine makes move after move, building up first his fishery, then using the external access it granted to smuggle in artifacts which were banned in Rapture, including a number of crosses and Bibles which we find strewn all over the place. Finally, Fontaine, with the help of Dr. Tenenbaum, builds the plasmid business, giving the citizens of Rapture the ability to change themselves into whatever they desire. Ryan detested this at first, looking down on the plasmids as inferior.
Rosenberg is demanding to speak about this Fontaine business. I'm trying to build a proper financial market, and this idiot keeps going on about this, genetic modification, that. I'll go spend an hour pretending to pay attention to the poor fellow and be home as soon as I can.
Eventually, however, he had no choice but to acknowledge Fontaine's foresight and innovation. Adam was the future, and Frank Fontaine had wrested control of the great chain away from Andrew Ryan. So, what was Rapture's founder to do?
Perhaps it's time to give it a tug.
At the end of the day, Ryan was a hypocrite. Few men are not, but so often we find that the bigger the man, the bigger the hypocrite. When Rapture was, in his mind, endangered by smugglers who might bring news of the undersea city to the outside world, what did Ryan do? He had them hanged.
You stretched necks are a small price to pay for our deals.
When you venture into Arcadia, Ryan kills his forest for a second time, and when the scientist who engineered it for him attempts to resurrect it, he kills her too.
Ryan Industries maintains exclusive rights to the creation, use, and exploitation of the Lazarus vector.
And when Fontaine Futuristics becomes too large and powerful to let be, what does Andrew Ryan do? Does he let the market dictate as it will? Does he let the great chain continue to move on its current course? No. He seizes control of the business, a move that would have been unthinkable when Rapture was founded. That move doesn't happen immediately, of course. The war between Ryan and Fontaine went on for some time, and is detailed most objectively by Bill McDonough, Ryan's friend, contractor, and conscience, for what little good he could do in that latter role. In his audio diaries, we hear McDonough's concern and prescience regarding Fontaine and the projects he takes on. When tensions mount between the two visionaries, McDonough expresses his worry that Ryan's actions will jeopardize the future of this city, a city that Bill himself loves and cherishes.
Mr. Ryan, I believe in Rapture. That doesn't mean we always win. Fontaine Futuristics is the biggest thing going in Rapture. So let me be plain. When we arrest that tow rag Fontaine for his thieving and smuggling, we must make it clear that we won't touch his business interests.
Surprise, surprise, Ryan does end up taking over Fontaine Futuristics. Oh, but it's not actually Andrew Ryan doing it.
I'm hopping mad.
Slow down there, little lady.
Sorry, Jim, but I'm real upset. We came to Rapture to get away from government muscling and private business evil.
Well, big, Mary, but Andrew Ryan didn't take control of anything. The government council just assumed stewardship of Fontaine Futuristics until all of Frank Fontaine's crimes and betrayals against the people of Rapture are sorted out. Pretty soon, everything will be back to normal.
Really? Well, that's a weight off my shoulders.
Remember, Mary, doubting the council only emboldened the bandits.
Those announcements, and by announcements I do mean propaganda, that you would hear from time to time over Rapture's loudspeakers are some of my favorite elements of Bioshock's environmental storytelling. You can imagine the members of Rapture's government brainstorming how to assure the poor, dumb common folk that everything is okay, until one genius stands up and says, "I know, we have a hysterical woman get calmed down by a knowledgeable, confident man. Genius, Johnson. Absolute genius." Considering that Rapture was supposed to be a city for the brightest and the best, it's amusing how basic and even demeaning the PSAs and advertisements are. But it makes sense. As I said in the introduction, the populace of Rapture has been losing their humanity, has been reduced to base instincts and urges. The most advanced technology imaginable has done nothing to slow this decline, but instead can rightly be blamed for it. Given the chance to rewrite their genetic code to become whatever they want to be, who did the citizens of Rapture become?
There's an arms race on here in Rapture, but it's not about who can build the best guns and the biggest bombs. It's about who can become less of a man and more of a monster.
Why did this happen? It's simple, really. Plasmids offered easy access to that which should never be granted freely: power. I want to make one thing clear before we continue. Power is not evil. It will not inevitably corrupt those who hold it. Bioshock itself holds fast to this view, even though its central antagonist, the first one anyway, creates a world which urges its citizens to seek more and more power without end. The plasmid advertisements, for example, are all about dominating other people. Freeze them, burn them, sick a Big Daddy on them, whatever. But power itself is a neutral thing. What is power? Anyway, we have a new word for it in today's media landscape: agency, the ability to make choices free of outside constraint. And modern Hollywood loves agency, or their understanding of it, which is ironically quite similar to Andrew Ryan's. Though the two entities would certainly be at odds politically, their ideas of personal agency are hardly distinguishable from one another. Horseshoe theory remains undefeated. At their core, power and agency are no more than the ability to choose what we want to choose. A problem arrives then when we realize that a path that we might want to choose will result in us having less power. We can choose to lessen our own agency. This is the game's main problem with which you are presented: harvest or save. If you choose to save the Little Sisters, you are effectively handicapping yourself, reducing your potential strength, another synonym for power. Bioshock asks its players, to whom do these lives belong? Are they yours, or are they their own? The agency contradiction is that the freer we assert ourselves to be, the more likely it is that our choices and actions will affect the freedom of others. The more agency you claim, the greater chance you will deprive those around you of it, and vice versa. That's not bad necessarily, that's just life. As George Costanza loved to say,
"We're living in a society!"
And so give and take is inevitable and necessary. Andrew Ryan rejected that notion. He insisted that every man and woman could pursue their own interests without bothering to think of the needs of others, and by doing so, they would progress far beyond legally constrained and morally limited civilization. It was inevitable that he fall prey to selfishness and pride, that power would become not a tool but a goal in and of itself.
But when it got hard, Ryan didn't believe in Rapture, didn't believe in the great change. He believed in power.
Of course, no man would ever admit that he just wants power. He has a goal, a vision, a dream, and that is what matters. A man must believe in something. Even when Rapture is falling to pieces, its populace consumed by their desire for Adam, its infrastructure crumbling because fewer and fewer people want to perform the lowly task of maintaining it, and its organization becoming more and more like a despotic government, Andrew Ryan still believes in his creation.
My city will live. My city will thrive. When that day comes, you'll use your tombstone for payment tax.
What a line. I know everyone loves Ryan's iconic phrase that he utters when you finally meet him in person, but this one might take the cake for me. It's almost a shame how much of Bioshock's story you can miss because you are currently filling the air with gunfire and the screams of dying splicers. It would be all too easy to miss this speech entirely should you be otherwise engaged when it came over the radio. And I love the utterly utilitarian vision portrayed in that line. Why waste good stone to mark the grave of a failure? Better it give people sure footing as they traverse Rapture in all her renewed glory. Your life is worth nothing except what Andrew Ryan will make of it. He built this city, and he will dispose of it as he so chooses.
Even in the Book of Lies, sometimes you find truth. There is indeed a season for all things. And now that I see you flesh to flesh and blood to blood, I know I cannot raise my hand against you. But know this, you are my greatest disappointment. Does your master hear me? Atlas, you can kill me, but you will never have my city. My strength is not in steel and fire. That is what the Parasites will never understand. A season for all things. A time to live and a time to die. A time to build and a time to destroy!
Again, in those words, we see Ryan's philosophy that the worth of a thing is measured only in its usefulness. The Bible, the Book of Lies, as he calls it, is irrelevant to a man whose God is industry itself, but it does contain advice that he finds worthwhile, so he is happy to use those parts and discard the rest. He is free, as he sees it, to do as he likes with whatever life might bring his way. But, at the very least, Andrew Ryan is not so prideful, not so pompous as to ignore the reality of the situation. He knows that he is human. He knew that his time would, one day, come to an end. That time is now. Could he still fight? Perhaps, but he would almost certainly lose, his strength and power proven insufficient. He would rather exercise what little agency he has left. He would choose his time before it can be taken from him.
In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
The thing is, Ryan isn't really making the choice here. His hand has been forced. The time to destroy has arrived despite his every effort. Loss and death are imminent, no matter what he does. So, in his pride, he asserts himself one last time. At least he thinks he will choose the manner of his death. He will exercise the final power over his life.
Chooses! Obeys! Obey!
As a portrayal of villainy, it's absolutely brilliant. Andrew Ryan is one of the best written antagonists in the history of gaming, and this scene is iconic for very good reasons. One such reason is that it shows us just how hollow Ryan's philosophy ultimately is. What is the value of choice, of agency, of power, if they insist upon themselves to the point that they force you to order your own execution? What is the point of unadulterated freedom if its pursuit constrains you to a single unchanging path? A man who insists on freedom from authority, from the desires and needs of others, from anything else other than his own whims, is obviously a slave to those whims. Andrew Ryan, at the end, despite his proclamation, was a slave to his own mistaken idea of freedom. What is the true meaning of freedom, then? It does not, it cannot mean we have the agency to say and do whatever we wish without consequence or constraint. It cannot be ordered toward our own selfish ends, or we will end up like this. Instead, freedom must exist for the sake of love. You think this is the truth for which you fight in the early hours of the game. Jack, the silent protagonist, obeys directives from Atlas, the only friendly voice you encounter in Rapture, a man who has seen enough of this dreadful city and wishes only to get his wife and child to safety. While everyone else splices themselves to hell, Atlas is the only man still looking out for anyone other than number one. So when the submarine explodes with his wife and child inside, it makes perfect sense for him to lose his cool and turn vengeful.
Now would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
That facade comes crashing down, of course, when Andrew Ryan reveals the truth about who you are, when he orders his own death, and when you use his genetic key to stop the self-destruction of Rapture.
The name's Frank Fontaine.
Now, in comparison to Ryan, Fontaine is a far, far less interesting villain. I don't say that to disparage the character or the writing, far from it. The con man is purposefully and intentionally less fascinating than the visionary who built the city. Andrew Ryan was an honest and sincere man. Did he become a hypocrite before the end? Absolutely. But at least for a time, he truly believed in something. He had a dream that he was convinced was worth pursuing, and he made it happen. Rapture's collapse was inevitable for many reasons, but Fontaine lays out one of the most inescapable.
These sad saps. They come to Rapture thinking they're gonna be captains of industry. But they all forget that somebody's gotta scrub the toilets.
Again, great villains must sprout from a seed of truth. Fontaine is absolutely correct. Every other city ever invented needs laborers who will perform the lowly tasks that require no great intellect, no imagination or innovation, but merely a healthy supply of elbow grease and humility, the latter of which would doubtless be in short supply among a populace who had the means to move to a city at the bottom of the ocean. Not that Fontaine cares about truth unless he can use it. He is a con man, after all. He will become whoever he needs to become and say whatever he needs to say in order to get ahead. Instead of seeing this inevitable fact about Rapture and wondering how he might work to ensure everyone in the city could pursue their intended dreams, Fontaine saw an opportunity. The truth does not matter except as an advantage. There is no such thing as right or wrong to such a man. One does not do good or evil. A man either plays or he gets played. Villains such as Frank Fontaine do everything in their power to ensure the wool is over some other sucker's eyes, and they wield their considerable powers of perception to do so. Where Ryan believes that the great chain will move in the proper direction if only each and every man strives to enrich himself, Fontaine knows that men are not so noble. Perhaps Ryan's vision would come true if men would just do what he does, but as I said earlier, men will not just. No matter the system, political, economic, what have you, men will find ways to mess it up, to make it less than its founder thought it could and should be. Fontaine knows this, and he exploits it. He understands that there will be those in Rapture who are dissatisfied with their lot in life, who seek a leg up, who need a helping hand. So he creates Fontaine's Home for the Poor, helping out the little guy who has fallen through the cracks in Ryan's grand vision.
City to make people worship you. Just make the chumps believe they're worth a nickel.
I absolutely love how Frank Fontaine is used as a foil to Andrew Ryan. As we heard earlier, Ryan despises altruism above all else. He believes it to be a poison, and Fontaine proves him right, in a way. After all, Frank did not build a poorhouse out of the goodness of his heart. I'm not sure he has one. The con man certainly does not have a generous bone in his body. In this, he resembles the man whose reign he would overthrow. Neither man believes in altruism, in the goodness of mankind, and ultimately, that is what makes them villains. Yes, their deeds are evil, but those must stem from their philosophies, from their beliefs about human nature. Andrew Ryan believed altruism to be cancerous because he thought it inherently false. Frank Fontaine shares his view, but instead of rejecting generosity altogether, he sought to use it as a front and a shield, twisting it to his own devious ends. And Fontaine thinks any man would do the same if only he possessed the same level of ingenuity. Ryan thought all men are as selfish as he was, so he built a city with the express intent of harnessing that self-centeredness. Villains, truly evil men, think all men are deep down as depraved as they are. They lack many virtues, undoubtedly, to one extent or another, but none more so than hope. The Ryans and Fontaines of the world have no confidence that man can rise above his base instincts, that he can be genuinely selfless and giving, that he can choose to love instead of use. Although they would never see it this way, they have fallen into despair. They do not seek a better world, only one made more and more in their own image. Ryan would claim he believed men to be nobler than Fontaine believes, but I don't think that's true. If you think that charity will and can only be used to blind the moronic masses to your true, poisonous intent, you do not, in fact, believe in any goodness in mankind. Though it is undoubtedly true that Ryan's philosophy included some sort of honor code, its devolution into the final form we hear it take was inevitable. This, Fontaine knew, even though Rapture's founder did not. Men, Frank Fontaine asserted, are suckers. They will dance. You just have to play the right notes. There is no nobility, no morality, no charity. There is only you versus me. This is why, immediately after he reveals Atlas to be a moniker and you escape from his murder bots, Fontaine insists that Dr. Tenenbaum is false, that her saving Jack was nothing more than a ploy, a play for power, because that's what he would do.
That Tenenbaum ain't what you think. Florence Nightingale, huh? That'll all come crashing down before you can say, can't have made it.
Right here is where you realize Fontaine has lost. Sure, there's quite a bit of game left, including Jack turning into a big daddy in order to be able to face our villain, but at this moment, it is clear that Fontaine has lost control. His plans failed. You did not die in Ryan's lair, as he intended. Should he have told you to let the bots kill you? Yeah, probably, but we can at least paint that as hubris rather than sheer stupidity and contrivance. Fontaine did not believe Jack would survive because who would come to save him? Who would do such a selfless thing? What would they have to gain? And yes, Dr. Tenenbaum does have her own motives, but she is not, as Frank asserts, the sole reason for Jack's continued fight.
You won't even walk till somebody says go.
It is entirely understandable, however, that Fontaine has this view of Tenenbaum. As we learn from a number of audio diaries, the two of them combined forces to make Adam the dominant market force within Rapture. The Doctor discovered this substance's properties when a dock worker's withered hand was healed after a sea slug bit it, and engineered the method of creating more Adam than the slugs alone could provide. Namely, the Little Sisters. We are introduced to the character of Dr. Tenenbaum when we encounter a little sister whose protector has just died. Atlas encourages the player to harvest the Adam within the child, likening the act to removing a terminal patient from life support. The Doctor, on the other hand, pleads with Jack to save the girls, to help them, promising to make it worth his while despite the reduced Adam he will receive. This is, of course, Bioshock's fundamental choice, its only choice, really. And while the mechanics of how your decisions lead to the ending aren't perfect exactly, I deeply appreciate the philosophy behind this fork in the road that the game thrusts upon you. How do you treat other people? Do you see them as assets, as things to be used and discarded, or as people? The main reason Rapture has collapsed in the fashion that it has is because far too many people chose the former. They viewed not only strangers, but their coworkers, loved ones, even themselves as clay to be molded, or canvas to be painted, or toys to be broken. This truth is shown most starkly quite early on in the campaign when the player uncovers the ravings of the mad Dr. Steinman, a plastic surgeon who has adopted the power of Adam with his whole heart, or whatever's left of it.
But Adam gives us the means to do it. And Ryan frees us from the phony ethics that held us back. Change your look, change your sex, change your race. It's yours to change. Nobody else's.
Is true freedom only to be found when we are unrestrained from ethics, from morals, from any idea of right and wrong? Steinman would say so, clearly, but let's take a look at how that worked out for him, shall we? When we finally reach the Doctor's lair with the words, "Above all, do no harm," painted on the floor in blood, a detail I thought was pure brilliance, he is ranting and raving about all his failures, all the patients he has deemed too
ugly, ugly, ugly!
The guy has gone mad, plain and simple. Being unconstrained by phony ethics did nothing to free him. Instead, he chose a new, more devious master to serve. His own obsession with perfection, with creating beautiful works of art with his knife to rival those which Picasso painted with a brush. I find his failure and subsequent frustration to succeed in this endeavor quite fascinating. Setting aside for a moment the main philosophical point of personalism versus objectifying, let's focus on Steinman's chosen task. He sought to make humanity more beautiful, and yet he objects that one of his test subjects was symmetry, at least in the human face, is the foremost objective measure of attractiveness. It's ridiculous to say that something is not beautiful because it is too symmetrical, because that's what everyone on Earth wants to see in the face of their potential future mate. There is no improving on perfect symmetry. Bioshock is not a religious game, not overtly anyway, but it definitely believes that nothing good will come out of man trying to play God. Dr. Steinman is proof of that belief. He was convinced, thanks to Adam, that he was limited only by his imagination, and perhaps that was true, but if so, then his imagination was lacking. His ability to envision true beauty and greatness far less than he thought. He could not create beauty where it did not already exist. Try as he might, he could only mar and destroy. But Steinman, at least, had the decency to realize that his attempts were folly and his art ugly. Did that stop him? No. Jack did. With the corpse of Steinman's own patient, I had to. Poetic justice and all that. However, later on in the story, we meet a character who, like the deranged doctor, enjoys treating people as playthings, but unlike Steinman, seems quite pleased with his endeavors. Steinman and Cohen is one of the most fascinating characters in Bioshock and deserves more time than I have allotted for him here, perhaps when I make a video on how Bioshock wrote evil for the main channel, but for now, let us at least appreciate his style and his ability to make an entrance.
The artist has a duty to seduce the ear and delight the spirit. So say goodbye to those two blowhards, and hello to an evening with Sander Cohen.
Cohen could hardly be any more different from Steinman. Where the doctor is crazed, he is calm. Where Steinman rants and raves, Cohen speaks evenly and soothingly. Where the surgeon repeatedly fails to live up to his own expectations, the artist revels in his creations, which just so happen to be corpses cast in plaster and set in various poses. We see firsthand how this comes to be as a disciple or student of Cohen's fails to meet whatever standard of artistic performance, receives a fatal punishment, and is turned into a grotesque statue that presents the player with his newest weapon. Despite their stark differences, the two men are philosophically the same. To them, people are not people. They are things to be cut up and sewn back together, to be molded and sculpted according to one's desires. Sander Cohen's masterpiece, as he calls it, is a collection of plasterized stiffs holding up photos of those disciples of his who managed to live long enough to escape his clutches, at least until he sent Jack after them.
When I am dust, this is what they'll point to.
Would Andrew Ryan approve of such actions? I sincerely doubt it, but this right here is the inevitable end of his philosophy. Men who are permitted to follow their most selfish impulses, who are freed from the tyranny of laws and government, will obviously become monsters. Is such a fate inevitable for every man? I would think not, but for the kind of person who intentionally and purposefully chose to live in such a place, it would be hard to avoid. However, even if one should fall into such depravity, the road to redemption remains always open, as proven by the story of Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, whose arc is defined by a shift in viewpoint and philosophy, as she comes to view others not as things to be used, but as people to be loved. As I mentioned earlier, Adam was discovered in a particular species of sea slug, but one that apparently wasn't quite plentiful enough.
The slugs alone could not provide enough Adam for serious work, but combined with the hosts, now we have something. The slug is embedded in the lining of the host's stomach, and after the host feeds, we induce regurgitation. And then we have 20-30 times yield of usable Adam. The problem now is the shortage of hosts.
Take note of the clinical language. Hosts, not little girls, not innocent and helpless young children, not orphans who desperately need affection, care, and love, but hosts. How does a woman reach a mental state that allows her to treat the weak and powerless in such a fashion? Well, Bridget was, as a teenager, held in a concentration camp, so there's that, even if she does not blame her wickedness on her imprisonment.
I could blame the Germans, but in truth I did not find tormentors in the prison camp, but kindred spirits.
The camp awoke within Tenenbaum a love for science, and that was it. The Germans did not teach her to hate other people, to see them as lowly, servile, and only good for lab rats. They didn't need to. They simply held up scientific advancement as the highest good, so naturally all other goods would be subservient. Luckily for the doctor, biology still exists. I absolutely loved finding her audio diaries and hearing her become increasingly uncomfortable with what she was doing. Despite absorbing a parasitic organism into their bodies, the girls still acted like children.
They play and sing. Sometimes they look at me and they don't stop. Sometimes they smile.
They cannot, as she would have liked, be in a vegetative state, and so Tenenbaum is forced to watch these children, to see her hosts form a bond with her.
One of the children came and sat in my lap. I push her off. I shout, "Get away from me!" I feel hatred like I never felt before in my my chest, bitter, burning fury. I can barely breathe. And suddenly I know. It is not this child I hate.
Finally, Bridget is forced to admit the truth. She cares about these little girls.
These children I brutalized have awoken something inside that for most is beautiful and natural. But in me is an abomination. My maternal instinct.
This is just an incredible character arc, and is a perfect encapsulation of the game's philosophy. What do you choose? Your own ambition and pride, or the good of another? Andrew Ryan believed the latter choice is a lie and a poison, but it is in fact the only reason humanity can thrive, the only reason we still exist. The maternal instinct is one of the most necessary, powerful, and beautiful forces of nature, and it is an ultimately selfless one. It nourishes, defends, and loves for the sake of the child, not that of the mother. Once sparked, it cannot easily be put out. For Dr. Tenenbaum, it set her on the road to redemption, to undoing all the evil she had done. I will refrain from diving further into her psychology, her guilt in particular, because that will fit better in a later video, but I must at least mention Bridget's hope for the future. She believes that she can still save the little sisters, that some good can come out of all this wickedness, that choosing to love instead of to use will produce good fruit.
I've seen such terrible things and done worse myself. Thank you for reminding me that the light of the world has not yet been snuffed out.
In this endeavor, she needs a partner. She needs you. Also known as Jack, but aside from the fact that I've said it already, you can be forgiven for not remembering the name, since it only appears once at the very beginning of the game, if memory serves, and you never hear your character talk. Actually, you do. Once. In a particularly chilling audio log, you hear Dr. Suchong command young Jack via the phrase, "Would you kindly?" to pull up John Wick antagonist on a helpless puppy. And Jack does. And he hates it. And he breaks down in tears. This is important. Would you kindly can force your hand, but it cannot change your mind, and it cannot turn your heart to stone. Even if you are compelled to do all manner of horrible deeds, you can choose not to revel in them. You can choose to desire differently. This is why Atlas doesn't force Jack to harvest the little sisters, especially the first time with Tenenbaum, who would recognize the phrase, standing within earshot of the handheld radio, but even afterward. Remember that he doesn't immediately command Jack to kill Andrew Ryan as soon as he enters Rapture. Frank waits. He stages the death of his family. He gives Jack a reason to want Ryan dead. If our hero is compelled to act against his own desires, it might have a negative effect on his ability to do anything. Were Fontaine to force Jack to harvest later little sisters, the mental stress might break him, or at least would make him realize he's a puppet, might make him seek to sabotage Atlas's plans in whatever way he could, which wouldn't be overly difficult considering Frank's only link to Jack is through a radio that could be turned off or smashed underfoot. And yes, I know Atlas said, "Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?" But he never said you had to keep holding onto it or not rip out the batteries. Anyway, now that all the chips are on the table and we know who's who and what's what, we come to the final battle, the ultimate clash of philosophies, the outcome of which will determine Rapture's future. On one side, we have Frank Fontaine, a man who saw something he wanted and devised a scheme to seize it, regardless of cost. On the other, we have Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, a woman who worked for years at Fontaine's side until she realized the true ugliness of their endeavor and swore off ambition for the sake of the weak and helpless. And as I mentioned earlier, Frank does not believe that Bridget's crusade is true, that she really means well. It is all an act, a trick, a way to subvert and undermine him. In the same vein, he believes that Jack remains a puppet, but now it is Tenenbaum pulling the strings.
You won't even walk till somebody says go.
I know I played that clip before, but it's relevant again now for a slightly different reason. Frank Fontaine, like Andrew Ryan, did not believe in altruism or generosity or charity, not for themselves, not for anyone. They did not think it possible to serve another without debasing oneself, without becoming less than a man is supposed to be. A man chooses, a slave obeys. That is a false dichotomy. A man can choose to obey his conscience, to obey the law, to obey the moral imperative to give his life for those who need him. No man makes his decisions in a vacuum, free of all influences and pressures. We all choose to obey something, whether the commands are imposed from within or without. It is absurd to suggest that a man who chooses to obey righteous decrees and to follow a set of guiding principles is less free than a man who follows his every lowly instinct in a never-ending search of pleasure or profit. Was Dr. Steinman free? Was Sandra Cohen? Was Andrew Ryan, locked away in his office, a free man? No. They were all slaves to their own vices and self-serving impulses. They could not control their desires any better than Jack could control his actions when someone said, "Would you kindly?" They could never have chosen to give up even an ounce of power, even if doing so meant saving a child's life. But you can. You, the player, have the freedom to make that choice. And if you make the right choice, you will find that the limiting option is not so limiting, that choosing to obey your moral compass is what will result in true freedom. We often think of freedom or agency or self-actualization as goods in and of themselves. And while they are, to some extent, it would be more accurate to say that they are simple facts of life. And life is good. Ultimately, our choices are our own. We become the people we choose to be. I do not say that to disregard the reality of circumstance, quite the opposite. No matter where we grow up or how dysfunctional our environment, we are given a choice. Do we choose to serve our own base instincts regardless of the costs others might pay? Or do we choose to love, to serve, to obey?
You saved them. You gave them the one thing that was stolen from them. A chance. A chance to learn. To find love. To live. And in the end, what was your reward? You never said. But I think I know. A family.
Or if you chose to harvest, you get access to nukes, so that's pretty cool too, I guess. I mean, I don't doubt for a second that Andrew Ryan would have used ICBMs to keep Rapture safe from outside interference. If you followed in his footsteps, why shouldn't you? And yeah, I know the mechanics of getting the bad ending aren't exactly evenly weighted, but hey, maybe you should have thought of that before you pressed the harvest button twice. But I love how story after story comes back to this fundamental moral choice. Do you choose to love or to use? It's not as if you have to abandon your own goals and ambitions entirely in order to choose the good of another. You just can't supersede them. Even in the game, it barely slows you down in terms of atom and plasmids, which, helpful as they are hardly what matters.
Adam improved every aspect of man except his character.
I'd like to leave you with this final point, this ultimate truth that resounds throughout the philosophy of Bioshock and Cyberpunk. No scientific, technological, or medical advancement will ever make man good. We may enhance our understanding of the universe, enable global communication, trade, and education, and prolong our lives by decades. And those are good things, but they cannot change our hearts. They cannot and will not compel us to treat our fellow man as someone worth sacrificing for. After all, a man chooses. Whether or not he is a slave, well, that depends entirely on what he chooses.